Okay, here's the eye, and it's covered by a thick, tough scleric coat, which is basically composed of two parts. Here we have the tough white opaque layer, sometimes referred to as the white of the eyes. And then up front over here, we have the cornea, a transparent layer. Now, as we go deeper into the eye, we come up to the second layer, the sclera being the outer layer. The inner layer here is the choroid layer, and this over here is the ciliary body. Here we have the iris, and here we have the pupil, which is where light goes in. I want to point out, this is also the lens, and let me point out that the lens and the iris form a barrier to two chambers in the eye. The anterior chamber is filled with a watery substance called an aqueous humor, and here, behind the lens, we have the posterior chamber, which is filled with a jelly-like substance called a vitreous humor. Now, as we get into the eye, notice over here, here we have the ciliary body, and here we have the ciliary ligaments. Now, underneath the second coat, this choroid coat, we have the inner layer of the eye known as the retina. This is the optic disc. This is the fovea centralis. And these nerves centralize here and go into what is called the optic nerve, which leads to the brain.
There are 3 sets of muscles controlling eye movement. And it's easier to think of them in pairs. So there are 3 pairs of muscles that control the eye. There are 4 rectus muscles and 2 oblique muscles. And you'll remember that rectus muscles are straight and obliques are at an angle. And we'll show those to you in a moment. So the first pair would be the lateral rectus and medial rectus. The lateral rectus is going to be on the side, and medial, of course, will be on the inside. The second pair of rectus muscles will be the superior rectus and the inferior rectus. The 2 pairs, or the 1 pair of oblique muscles, are a little bit harder to see. Up here, you can see the trochlear setup of the superior oblique. If you pull back on this model, you can see the inferior oblique muscle. And the way to remember them, the lateral rectus muscle moves the eye laterally, and it's controlled by cranial nerve 6, or the abducens. The superior oblique, you'll remember this trochlear structure is controlled by the trochlear cranial nerve, or nerve number 4. And then all the other 4 are controlled by the oculomotor, which is cranial nerve. So the 3 pairs of muscles that control eye movement, the lateral rectus, on the opposite side would be the medial rectus, on the opposite side of the eye, the superior rectus on the top, inferior rectus on the bottom, and this is the inferior oblique. Notice the angle. And the superior oblique. Notice the trochlear structure of the superior oblique.
Light goes in to the eye, and it bounces off the back of the retina, and it first hits light receptor cells known as cones and rods. These are the cones, and these are the rods. Then, of course, the signal travels down to the bipolar cells, and then on to the ganglion cells. And then after that, the signal is transferred to the optic nerve.
So here we are looking at the ear, and this outer part of our ear that everybody knows as our ear on the body is called the auricle or the pinna, and the top part of this right here, this is called the helix, and then this bottom part, the earlobe, has no supporting cartilage, which is why it's so kind of flimsy. From this shell-shaped or auricle funnels sound into the external acoustic meatus or the external auditory canal. Going down here, the sound waves next come in contact with the tympanic membrane, also known as the eardrum. This is seen better over here in this picture, and this is the boundary between the external ear and the middle ear. The sound waves travel to the membrane, causing it to vibrate. The vibrations are then transferred into the auditory ossicles of the inner ear or middle ear, which these ossicles magnify vibrations approximately 20 times. The first bone of the auditory ossicles is the malleus, which is also known as the hammer. The second bone is called the incus or the anvil, and the third bone is the stapes, also known as a stirrup because it resembles the shape of the stirrup. When the stapes vibrates, it vibrates against the oval window here, which transmits sounds from the stapes into the inner ear and the cochlea. Underneath here is the round window, which moves opposite of the oval window to relieve pressure caused inside of the cochlea. Underneath that is the eustachian tube, which links the middle ear to pharynx. This makes the ear pop when you yawn or swallow and equalizes the pressure between the middle ear and the outside air. If the pressure isn't the same, the eardrum will not vibrate. Up here at the top is the epitympanic recess, or the superior boundary of the middle ear, made by the petrous process of the temporal bone. Moving over here, you can see the mastoid, the entrance of the mastoid antrum, which is a canal that leads to the mastoid air cells inside the mastoid process. And moving over here, we can see the muscles of the ear. The tensor tympani, which is the muscle that originates in the internal acoustus meatus and inserts into the malleus. And then this tiny muscle here is the stapedius, which connects the posterior wall of the middle ear to the stapes. These muscles contract reflexively to limit the vibration of the ossicles and prevent damage to the hearing receptors.
Okay, reviewing the inner ear, we have the bony labyrinth structure, as you can see here, which contains the cochlea, the vestibule, and the semicircular canals, which are the three parts, which are the anterior, posterior, and lateral semicircular canal. This is also another picture of the inner ear and the same structure that we just went over, which also contains the cochlea here and the semicircular canals here, and a beautiful picture of the vestibulocochlear nerve.
The cochlea is basically a long tube. It's about 3.5 centimeters long, and it's coiled like a snail shell and filled with fluid called endolymph. Running through the cochlea for its entire length is a plate of bone and an inner tube that is also filled with endolymph. And these are the structures that divide the outer tube of the cochlea into two separate chambers. The scala vestibuli and the scala tympani. Looking in the very middle, you can see what is called the organ of Corti, which is where hearing actually occurs. The organ of Corti lies within the middle chamber of the cochlea, and it contains literally thousands of hair cells, such as these and these, which are the actual receptors of vibration. The apical surface of the hair cells contain an array of tiny, what are called stereocilia, which give the hair cells their name. There are the inner hair cells, which are the auditory receptors, and outer hair cells, which help to tune the cochlea as well as the supporting cells. These very sensitive stereocilia of the inner hair cells are embedded in a membrane, which is called the tectorial membrane. Beneath these cells is the basilar membrane. Again, endolymph is in here, and perilymph is in the outer chambers of the cochlea. Moving outward, you can see the spiral ganglion of the cochlea.